So that was Rolf Nafziger, SVP of Deutsche Telekom Global Carrier. Now, next up, we're going to be having the principal analyst looking at everything wholesale telecoms related from OMDIA, and that's Julian Watson. And Julian, you were with us, I can't believe it, it's a year ago, really, with our last wholesale event. And time certainly has flown. And we're going to be hearing from you very soon as to what's been going on in the past year in the world of wholesale and trends. And I look forward to speaking with you as well after your presentation. So a very warm welcome to MEF CONNECTS Wholesale 2022, and take it away. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, James, and welcome to everybody. Good morning, good evening, depending on where you are in the world. So as James says, I was lucky to present at last year's wholesale event, MEF wholesale event. So this year I'm going to be talking about a slightly different area. So the findings of our most recent survey of wholesale customers, as well as trends we're seeing in wholesale innovation. So just to start with a little bit about who OMDIA is. So we are part of Informatech, which is part of Informa PLC. So Informatech provides events, media, training and research to the technology industry. You can see the verticals that we address at the top of this slide. OMDIA itself is the research division of Informa Tech, and we were formed about sort of 2 years ago through the combination of Ovum, IHS Markit Technology, Heavy Reading, and other research organizations. So we've been covering the wholesale industry for a pretty long time, for over 20 years, and our syndicated research and consulting spans a really broad range of fixed and mobile infrastructure and services, as well as a focus on service provider strategies in this area. So a couple of our regular research reports are a wholesale customer survey, which is pretty much biannual, as well as our global wholesale forecast update, which is going to be available in the latest edition later this year. So that segments the wholesale market opportunity across 6 segments, 4 regions, 8 sub-regions, and well over 25 countries now. So what I want to start with today is some shifts we're seeing in the enterprise and consumer end market. So on the face of this, I think this isn't directly about wholesale. However, changes in end customer markets, whether it be enterprises or consumers, in terms of behavior and requirements, will have an impact on the types of services and experiences they need from both their direct service providers, and indeed all of this will cascade up to the wholesale telecoms industry. So there are a couple of trends I'd like to highlight in particular here, and they come from our most recent survey of enterprise IT decision makers. So through our Enterprise Insight survey, which we last put out in October 2021. So the first trend is very much the importance of security, identity, and privacy, and also the creation of digital capability. So these are priorities for enterprise IT decision makers. The other thing I'd like to highlight is, what is happening with 5G? What are the perceptions among enterprises about 5G? So our survey suggests that enterprise thinking about 5G has fundamentally changed in the last couple of years. So before, around 2 years ago, we saw the reduction of reliance on fixed connectivity was viewed as one of the key 5G benefits. So now it really all appears to be about business outcomes, about building positive business outcomes around 5G, whether it be access to real-time data insights for faster decision making, improved productivity for remote and field workers, or simply better app performance. I think one interesting trend we are seeing in the consumer space is the spread of 5G tariffs based on speed tiers or hybrid tiers based on speed and data tiers. So at the beginning of 2022, we did some survey of MNO 5G offerings. We found that about a fifth of MNOs across the world have launched commercial 5G services based on such speed-based or data tier hybrid tariffs. So increasingly, I think this means that consumers are thinking about 5G in a similar way as fixed broadband. So what performance can I get? What speed can I get? What latency and ping can I get from my connectivity? So I think this shift in mindset is gradually going to shape expectations among consumers and enterprises about what types of performance they expect, not only in domestic and home environments, but also in the more challenging roaming environments too. So I mentioned our wholesale customer survey. So I want to walk through a few findings from our latest and 9th wholesale customer survey that we undertook earlier this year. So we've been running these surveys now for about 15 or so years. Our latest one was conducted in January and February 2022. So we surveyed over 160 decision makers across a range of wholesale customers, so spread across different regions of the world, all regions of the world. And we asked them about their current and planned usage of wholesale services, the criteria they use to select their wholesale providers, and indeed to whether to renew their wholesale providers, and much more besides. So by wholesale customers, we mean a sort of spread, a mix of MNOs, ISPs, fixed and converged operators, MVNOs, and then quite a long tail of other types of wholesale customers, whether it be systems integrators, content providers, and of course, hyperscalers too. So in all, we asked about 20 questions in this survey. So the one you can see here indicates responses to questions on the planned purchases of new wholesale services in 2022. So as you can see, there are a mixture of both traditional types of wholesale services, be it access, transport and interconnection, interactive media and cloud, and physical infrastructure, and newer types of wholesale services such as value-added services and managed services. As you can see from really the output of this chart, relatively newer types of wholesale services, namely value-added and managed services, are high up on the list of planned purchases in 2022 and beyond. So areas in which wholesale customers, and I think I'm particularly thinking about smaller or resource-constrained MNOs, mobile network operators, areas in which they need sort of help and assistance appear to be things like fraud protection and security and roaming. And I think the complexities certainly involved in 5G standalone roaming, which is ahead of us, and the sensitivities around latency and availability in roaming environments suggest that the wholesale requirements of the type of customers will grow. So I think this is, this finding is certainly echoed in the output from another question, which asked respondents, you can see here on this slide, to rank the importance of 10 market trends on their 1 to 2 year planning. So as you can see, globally, 5G, IoT, and fraud prevention and security came up the top three, followed by private networks and AI. So you can see here on this slide, there are a few market trends that have both numbers for 2018, the previous customer survey, and 2022, the latest. So questions on AI and private networks were included for the first time in 2022. So there isn't a comparison with the previous year. So there were some regional variations in the responses in terms of, what market trends will have most impact. So for instance, over a third of wholesale customers in Europe saw private networks as critical or important, as opposed to somewhat important or not important, as trends influencing their near-term planning. Whereas among wholesale customers in the Middle East and Africa region, IoT at 33% viewing as critical or important was viewed as, as more important, as higher up on the agenda than 5G and fraud prevention and security. So one of the questions I think that we've posed in each of our 9 wholesale customer surveys from the late noughties to date relates to wholesale vendor selection criteria. So each year that we've done the survey in, we've asked respondents to rank how important in terms of critical, not important, not important, somewhat important, each of 15 vendor selection criteria have been to their decision making. So you can see here the coloured shapes in the charts show significant changes in ranking of criteria between the 2018 survey and the 2022 survey. I think overall the key takeaway from this question is that by comparison to 2018, certainly how a wholesaler conducts business and transacts with customers is now as important as what services it offers and where, i.e. in which regions, in which localities of a country in which it operates. So you can see here things like organizational flexibility, innovation, taking an innovative approach to service development, to the way you interact with customers, and ease of doing business. So flexibility in the way that you interact with customers became a lot more important during the pandemic, as all of our sort of operational and business processes changed pretty rapidly. These really jumped up the right rankings. So it may surprise some to see that pricing is no longer viewed as a critical vendor selection criteria. It was the second most critical in 2018, but the least critical in 2022. So why is the big drop between these 2 years? So I think this is probably because over the past few years, wholesale providers as a whole have made a lot of progress in developing certainly more transparent pricing, particularly in relation to providing more visibility both into upfront CapEx costs that the wholesale customer might face, as well as ongoing OpEx costs. So there's been a lot of progress in this area, and I think this really reflects in the fact that it isn't seen as a critical vendor selection criteria anymore. It's how you do business, how you interact with your customers seems to be far more important nowadays. So you can see here that the breadth of different wholesale services offered, again, doesn't appear to be a critical vendor selection criteria. However, separate survey questions that we posed in the 2022 customer survey suggest that wholesale customers as a whole are reducing the number of players, of suppliers that they transact with. And another question suggested that they want to access a greater range of services from existing suppliers going forward. So a question about where they thought wholesale vendor selection criteria would evolve in the next couple of years suggests that the ability to offer a breadth of services is going to be really important. I think wholesale customers are pretty agnostic about whether this breadth of service comes from the wholesale provider itself or is a partnered service. So we're hearing quite a lot from wholesale customers that they want their wholesale providers to orchestrate both their proprietary services and best of breed partnered services through very easy to use portals. So you can go back and look at some of the wholesale vendor selection criteria. Here we've here we've defined them sort of for ease of use. You can see here in ease of doing business, we factor in things like pricing and quotation tools, web-based portals, and responsiveness to billing and service issues as within ease of doing business. And certainly things like automation, both network automation, service automation, and the automation of things like billing, of ordering, of seeing where a service availability is factored into things like organizational flexibility and the willingness to invest in long-term relationships. So you can see in the previous slide, I think that innovation is now the third most important wholesale vendor selection criteria. So I want to talk a little bit about this whole area. So we've been tracking wholesale innovation for the past decade or so through 11 annual wholesale innovation analyzers. So as you can see across those 10 years or so, the bulk of innovations we've seen have been in the new service area category compared to go-to-market, business model, technology, and strategy. So in terms of the companies that we've most frequently shortlisted, so Deutsche Telekom, that's including Deutsche Telekom Global Carrier, heads the list, followed by BT and Tata, but there is certainly a long tail of companies that have been shortlisted for wholesale innovations across the last decade through to BICS and Telstra and Telefonica, you can see here, and certainly an increasing range of wholesale innovations we've shortlisted have involved partnerships, as you can see here in the multi-carrier category. So here's a short list of the 2021 wholesale innovations. So I think there are two general trends we're seeing in wholesale innovation, certainly the innovations that we've tracked. One is increased partnered innovation, as I mentioned before, and also increase mobile related innovation. So I think in the 2021 wholesale innovation analyzer, about 4 of the 10 related to mobile innovation. So among the shortlisted mobile innovations we saw were an IoT detection tool from A1 Telekom Austria. This is a tool that enables MNOs to better detect and monetize low traffic IoT devices in roaming environments, which may have gone under the radar of sort of legacy systems that they used. Others, including the IPX navigator from Deutsche Telekom Global Carrier and Benox, and also a data roaming breakout service from Telefonica Global Solutions, really reflecting the fact that in a 5G world, local breakout is going to be needed to achieve the types of performance that you require in roaming environments. So I think across a lot of the mobile innovations we've seen is a trend that suggests that there's increasing need to support high levels of service in more challenging environments such as roaming and IoT. So I think that pretty much wraps up my talk, but just a few takeaways. So I think going forward, wholesale providers really need to be as flexible as possible in the way that they transact, they interact with their wholesale customers. So this implies not only technology change, so the integration of automation across networks, across services, across portals, across processes, but also it implies cultural change within wholesale providers. Innovation is a leading wholesale vendor selection criteria and is really key to differentiation. So as I said, a lot of the innovations we've seen is through partnered innovation. Typically, we think that you cannot innovate solely on your own. You need best-of-breed partners among both the hyperscalers and independent software vendors to bring the best solutions to address customer problems. 5G, IoT, and fraud prevention and security are going to be top priorities for wholesale customers. I think this is going to be not only the case in 2022 and 2023, but also beyond. And there are various reasons for that. Certainly 5G being a sort of strategic revenue opportunity for MNOs themselves and their enterprise customers, but there are also being skills gaps, particularly in the area of fraud prevention and security, both among retail service providers that are wholesale customers and their own enterprise customers too. And another thing I would stress is that certainly based on our survey, wholesale customers appear to want to transact with fewer suppliers. So the average number of customers they were transacting with in 2022 fell from 2018. So I think there's great importance in developing the right partnerships and orchestrating best of breed services through your partner programs and through your portals. Then lastly, I'd say enterprise needs, consumer needs and behavior are evolving really rapidly and are driving new requirements cascading up to wholesale providers. So changes in retail markets. So I talked about the increasing availability of speed-based 5G tariffs will have a knock-on impact on consumer and enterprise expectations in more challenging environments, whether it be IoT or roaming. I think that pretty much wraps up my talk. So if you have any questions, any disagreements, any comments you'd like to share with me, do drop me an email. Thank you. Thanks very much for listening.
Julian, thank you very much. Thank you very much indeed there. Just drilling down on a couple of points. The whole pricing thing, you and I have talked quite a bit before, and I've come very heavily from the messaging domain, excuse me, particularly SMS. And lots of people talk about the importance of quality in the industry. But at the end of the day, even though people say pricing is less important, it's all about the quality, the anti-fraud, making sure the route really is direct. It's not grey. There's nothing dodgy or potentially suboptimal about it. That really, I found, shocking is the wrong word, but I was totally surprised that pricing really has dropped down so far as one of the key factors within the wholesale world in the past 4 years. Do you think that's really going on out there, or it's what people like to say?
Well,
I think here, because people say quality all the time, a flight to quality. The reality is, if someone's got a really good price plumped right in front of them to route their traffic, 9 times out of 10 they'll take it.
Yeah, so I think that there are two factors here. So I think I've shared this particular screen again, so you can see pricing is less critical, but if you add up the sort of important element of the response, it's still really important. So it is ahead of a lot of other criteria if you factor both in critical and important responses. I think the 2 points I'd make is one, this pricing relates to a whole range of wholesale services. So I think a lot of the historical pain points, the historical sort of areas of dissatisfaction around wholesale customers has been for sort of things like lease circuits, pricing for services that requires building work, upfront construction, digging up of pavements, for instance, to add a link between branch offices. So I think it's more of a factor that influences fixed access and transport services rather than mobile in particular. I think it's probably fixed operators have made much more progress, and that sort of reflects the result of this survey. I think that the second thing I'd say is that it's really only dropped in relation to other criteria. I think just other factors have become way more important. And I think this is down to the experience of the pandemic. So the need to be flexible, the need to offer flexibility in price versus quality. So this is a price related factor. So basic pricing, whether it be list pricing, whether it be transparency of pricing, is less important. But on the other hand, flexibility in how you offer prices based on various tiers of quality is way more important. And as I said before, other sort of how you transact with wholesale customers factors have gained in relative importance. So you can see here the ease of doing business and innovations are way up there.
Okay, thanks. And one thing I must concur, and from what we're seeing within our own wholesale working group and discussions, this whole aspect of companies tending to work with fewer partners and doing more with those fewer partners, that's something that we're seeing amongst our members as well. We're definitely seeing that. And I remember myself working in the wholesale industry, working with a voice company, helping them move to messaging. And at that time, they were all about getting as many connections as fast as possible with people, rather than stepping back and thinking, who are we connecting with? What do we want to do with them? And then over time, you find that this massive stable of partners has been thinned out and thinned down. So yeah, that's something definitely our MEF members within our wholesale working group, it's reflected within that too. Absolutely. So Julian, thank you very much for your time. Great seeing you again. Thank you for your input. Great to see the changes. And who knows, hopefully we will be having MEF Connects Wholesale 2023. And let's see what the next year has to bring. So that was Julian Watson, Principal Analyst on everything wholesale telecoms related with OMDIA. Thank you for joining us, Julian.
Many thanks, James.
Bye.